The sun blazed mercilessly over the desert, its golden rays turning sand into a shimmering sea. The village of Valerian stood like an island amidst this vast expanse, a cluster of stone huts and weathered tents that seemed to defy both time and nature. It was home to soldiers, men and women hardened by years of service, their hearts as tough as the cracked earth beneath their feet. They lived simple lives here, far from cities and comforts, bound together by duty and camaraderie. Among them was Eric, a young soldier whose name carried whispers of bravery but also solitude. His mother had sent him away when he was just a boy, hoping the disciplined life of a warrior would shape him into someone strong enough to survive in a harsh world. She often said she wanted him to find purpose beyond their small farming town. But now, years later, her letters arrived less frequently, filled with cryptic phrases about destiny and choices. He didn't understand what she meant, nor did he dwell on it much. His days were consumed by patrols, training, and the occasional skirmish with raiders who dared venture too close to their borders. Today, however, something unusual stirred in the air, a tension unlike any battle readiness they'd felt before. Scouts had returned breathless, speaking of strange lights hovering above the dunes at dawn. No one believed them at first. Visions of heat mirages or trickery danced through everyone's minds. Yet as hours passed, more reports came flooding in, lights moving closer, unnatural shapes cutting across the horizon. When the elders gathered for council, they decided caution was best. Weapons were readied, shields prepared, and every villager took up posts along the perimeter walls. Eric stood near the gate, gripping his spear tightly while scanning the endless waves of sand. His heart pounded not out of fear, but anticipation. Something monumental was coming. He could feel it deep within his bones. And then, as if summoned by his thoughts, the ground trembled faintly. A figure emerged from the haze, tall and radiant, flanked by beings clad in armor so sleek it appeared liquid under the sunlight. Their steps made no sound, as though gravity itself bent to accommodate their presence. At the center of this procession walked a woman, or perhaps woman wasn't quite right. Her skin gleamed silver, catching the light like polished moonstone, and her eyes held galaxies within them. Long hair flowed behind her like spun starlight, defying wind or logic. She wore robes adorned with patterns that shifted and pulsed, resembling constellations swirling in some cosmic dance. Around her neck hung a pendant glowing faintly blue, pulsating with an energy that seemed alive. The villagers froze, unsure whether to attack or kneel. Eric stepped forward instinctively, drawn by forces he couldn't explain. As he approached, the alien princess, not human, yet undeniably regal, turned her gaze toward him. For a moment, time ceased to exist. Her expression softened, almost imperceptibly, and she raised one hand. The air around her shimmered, and suddenly words formed in their language, spoken without lips moving. "I seek one among you," her voice echoed, resonating inside their heads rather than their ears. One chosen by fate. Eric swallowed hard, glancing back at his comrades. Confusion rippled through the crowd, murmurs rising like distant thunder. Chosen by fate. What kind of nonsense was this? Still, none dared speak aloud. The princess continued, her tone calm yet commanding. "My people have watched yours for generations. We see strength, resilience, and fire. But only one carries the mark we seek, the mark of unity between our worlds." She paused, letting her words sink in. Then, with deliberate grace, she pointed directly at Eric. "You." Gasps erupted from the villagers, but Eric remained rooted to the spot, stunned. His mind raced. Why him? What mark? He hadn't done anything extraordinary lately, nothing worthy of such attention. Yet there was no denying the certainty in her gaze, nor the power radiating from her very being. Before anyone could protest or question further, the princess gestured for silence. "This is not a request," she said firmly. "It is a proposal, an alliance forged not just for me, but for both our peoples. You will come with me, and together we will decide the future." Eric opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. His chest tightened, torn between disbelief and awe. Somewhere in the chaos of emotions, a memory surfaced. His mother's letters, those cryptic words about destiny. Could this be what she meant? Was this why she sent him here, to stand where he stood now, face to face with an alien princess who claimed the stars themselves aligned him to her? For a fleeting second, doubt clawed at him. This was madness. Impossible. Yet as the princess extended her hand, waiting patiently, Eric realized one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever lay ahead, it wouldn't be ordinary. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, leaving behind everything familiar, and stepping into the unknown. The journey began with a single step, yet it felt like crossing into another realm entirely. As Eric moved toward the alien princess, the ground beneath his boots seemed to hum softly, responding to her presence. Her retinue parted silently, creating a path lined with glowing symbols etched into the sand. Each step illuminated brighter, casting an ethereal glow around them, as if the desert itself acknowledged her authority. Eric hesitated briefly, glancing back at the village. Faces peered from behind walls and rooftops, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. None called out to stop him, though. Whatever force compelled him forward felt unshakable, undeniable. When he reached her side, the princess turned gracefully, her robes flowing like water despite the stillness of the air. Without a word, she gestured for him to follow, and her entourage resumed their silent march. Eric fell into step beside her, acutely aware of the stark contrast between them. While she exuded an otherworldly elegance, he felt painfully human, his rough hands calloused from years of wielding weapons, his clothes caked with dust and sweat. Yet, strangely, she didn't seem to look down on him. Instead, her gaze lingered thoughtfully, as if studying not just his appearance but something deeper within. They walked until the village disappeared behind towering dunes, swallowed by the endless horizon. The farther they went, the stranger the landscape became. Sand shifted colors subtly, transitioning from pale gold to iridescent hues that shimmered even without sunlight. Strange plants sprouted sporadically, their leaves translucent and glowing faintly, like lanterns placed deliberately along their route. Eric reached out instinctively to touch one, only to jerk his hand back when it pulsed warmly under his fingertips. The sensation wasn't painful, but it sent a jolt through him, a reminder that this world operated by rules he didn't yet understand. "Where are we going?" he finally asked, breaking the heavy silence. His voice sounded foreign even to himself, raw against the eerie calm surrounding them. "To my vessel," she replied, her words forming directly in his mind rather than his ears. "It awaits beyond the dunes." Her answer left more questions than answers, but Eric didn't press further. There was something about her tone, calm, steady, that discouraged argument or resistance. Instead, he focused on observing the procession around them. Her guards moved with precision, each step synchronized perfectly, their armor reflecting light in ways that defied logic. Some carried staffs tipped with orbs that floated midair, emitting soft beams that illuminated their path. Others bore devices Eric couldn't begin to comprehend, humming softly with energy that prickled his skin whenever he got too close. As they climbed higher onto a ridge, the true magnitude of their destination revealed itself. Nestled in a valley below lay a massive structure unlike anything Eric had ever seen. It wasn't built, it seemed grown, organic curves blending seamlessly with the terrain. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, shifting colors depending on how the light hit it. Towers spiraled upward, impossibly thin yet sturdy, reaching toward the sky as if trying to bridge two worlds. At its base, portals glowed faintly, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. "This is your ship?" Eric asked, unable to mask his awe. She nodded once, her expression unreadable. "Our craft. It will take us to my homeworld." "And what happens there?" Her gaze met his again, piercing and intense. "You will learn. Everything has its place, Eric. Trust in that." Trust. The word hung heavily in the air, though whether it was advice or command, he couldn't tell. Before he could respond, the group descended into the valley, their pace quickening slightly. As they approached the vessel, the portals widened, revealing interiors bathed in soft, cool light. The air inside felt different, charged, alive. Eric hesitated at the threshold, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he was about to do. Leaving the desert behind felt daunting enough. Stepping into this alien world might strip away everything he knew about himself. But there was no turning back now. With a final glance at the horizon, he crossed over, following the princess into the unknown. Inside the vessel, reality seemed to unravel and reform around Eric. The walls shimmered with an opalescent glow, pulsating gently as if breathing. Corridors stretched endlessly, curving in ways that defied geometry, leading to chambers filled with humming machinery and floating orbs of light. Despite the strangeness, there was a sense of order, an underlying harmony that resonated with the same energy he'd felt earlier outside. Every step he took felt heavier, not because of gravity but because of the weight of his own insignificance in this vast, alien domain. The princess led him silently through the labyrinthine passages, her movements fluid and unhurried. Occasionally, members of her retinue would pause to interact with panels embedded in the walls, their fingers tracing patterns that caused ripples of color to spread outward. Eric tried to memorize their path, but it was futile. The corridors shifted subtly, rearranging themselves as if alive. At one point, he swore he saw a doorway vanish behind him after they passed through it. Finally, they entered a chamber unlike anything else aboard the ship. It was vast, domed, and illuminated by a soft, golden hue emanating from above. In the center stood a platform surrounded by intricate carvings that seemed to writhe and shift when viewed from certain angles. On the platform rested a crystalline object, roughly the size of a man's head, glowing faintly blue. The same shade as the pendant around the princess's neck. "This," she said, gesturing toward the crystal, "is the Heartstone. It binds all things, people, planets, destinies. My people use it to guide decisions, to ensure balance." Eric frowned, stepping closer cautiously. "And you think I'm connected to it somehow?" She tilted her head slightly, her galaxy-like eyes narrowing. "Not exactly. You carry potential. Potential I cannot ignore." He wanted to ask more, to demand clarity, but before he could speak, the chamber began to change. The carvings on the walls lit up, projecting images into the air, scenes of war, peace, destruction, and creation. Entire civilizations rose and fell before his eyes, their stories unfolding in mere moments. Among these visions, he caught glimpses of humans, not soldiers this time, but farmers, artisans, scholars. They stood alongside beings like the princess, working together, thriving together. "What am I supposed to do with all this?" Eric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The enormity of what she was suggesting pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. "You must decide," she replied simply, "whether to embrace the path laid before you or reject it. But know this, rejection comes at a cost." Her words chilled him, though her tone remained neutral. For the first time since meeting her, Eric noticed a flicker of emotion cross her face, something akin to vulnerability. It unsettled him more than anything else had so far. Here was a being of immense power, capable of commanding armies and traveling between worlds, yet she regarded him with an intensity that suggested uncertainty. Did she doubt herself? Or was this decision truly as significant as she claimed? Before he could process further, the chamber dimmed, and the visions faded. The princess turned away, motioning for him to follow once more. They exited the room and entered another corridor, this one narrower and quieter. After several minutes of walking, they arrived at what appeared to be living quarters. The space was simple yet elegant, adorned with furnishings that seemed to grow organically from the floor. A bed-like structure dominated one corner, while shelves lined another, displaying objects that looked part artifact, part art. "This will be your quarters while aboard," she explained. "Rest. Reflect. Tomorrow, we arrive at my homeworld. There you will meet my people, and they will meet you." With that, she turned and left, leaving Eric alone in the alien sanctum. He sank onto the bed, staring at the ceiling, which shimmered faintly like starlight. Sleep felt impossible, his mind racing with questions and doubts. Who was he to shoulder such responsibility? What made him worthy of this bizarre destiny thrust upon him? And most importantly, why did it feel like the choice wasn't entirely his to make? Somewhere deep within, a quiet voice whispered, "Because you've always been meant for more." The next morning, or what Eric assumed was morning, given the absence of natural light aboard the vessel, he was summoned to a grand hall where preparations for arrival were underway. The atmosphere buzzed with activity, though it lacked the frantic energy of human endeavors. Instead, everything moved with deliberate precision, each action synchronized as if choreographed by some unseen conductor. Servants glided past carrying trays of food that smelled both familiar and alien, while engineers monitored panels displaying streams of data incomprehensible to Eric. Despite the controlled chaos, there was an underlying calm, a sense of purpose that permeated every corner. Eric found himself standing awkwardly near the entrance, unsure of what to do or where to go. His discomfort must have been obvious because moments later, a figure approached him. Unlike the others, this individual wasn't dressed in ceremonial garb or armor. Instead, they wore simple robes that shimmered faintly, reminiscent of the princess's attire. Their features were softer, less angular, and their eyes held warmth rather than the detached efficiency he'd seen in others. "You're Eric," the newcomer said, their voice gentle yet melodic. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Eric replied cautiously. "Who are you?" "I am Lyra," they introduced themselves with a slight bow. "I serve as an advisor to Princess Nissa. She asked me to assist you during our descent." "Nissa," Eric repeated, testing the name. So the princess had a name after all. "Why does she need someone to help me? Isn't this her show?" Lyra chuckled softly, the sound musical and soothing. "In a way, yes. But transitions can be difficult, especially for someone unfamiliar with our customs. Consider me your guide, for now." Their offer eased some of Eric's tension, though not entirely. He followed Lyra deeper into the hall, where wide windows revealed the approaching planet. From afar, it looked breathtaking, a tapestry of blues, greens, and purples swirled together like paint on a canvas. As they drew nearer, details emerged. Sprawling cities suspended in midair, rivers that glowed faintly, forests with trees taller than mountains. It was beautiful, yes, but also intimidating. How could he possibly belong in such a place? "They'll judge me, won't they?" Eric muttered, voicing a fear he'd been harboring since boarding the ship. "Your people. They'll see me as inferior." Lyra stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Their expressions softened, almost pityingly. "Do not mistake curiosity for judgment, Eric. Yes, you are different. But difference is not weakness. If anything, it makes you valuable." Her words offered little comfort, but Eric nodded anyway, unwilling to let his doubts show too openly. Together, they continued toward a balcony overlooking the main deck, where a gathering had begun. Figures dressed in elaborate attire mingled quietly, exchanging pleasantries in tones too low for Eric to catch. He recognized some of the guards from earlier, now adorned with additional embellishments signifying rank or status. Others, presumably dignitaries or officials, carried themselves with an air of importance that bordered on arrogance. As they stepped onto the balcony, all conversation ceased. Dozens of pairs of eyes turned toward him simultaneously, scrutinizing him with varying degrees of interest. Eric resisted the urge to fidget under their collective gaze, reminding himself to stand tall. This was no longer just about him, it was about representing humanity, however imperfectly. Princess Nissa appeared moments later, descending gracefully from an upper level. Her presence commanded immediate attention, silencing even the subtle rustling of fabric. She moved to stand beside Eric, her posture regal yet inviting. When she spoke, her voice carried effortlessly across the room. "Esteemed guests," she began, her tone formal yet warm. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter, not only for my people but for yours as well. Through courage and circumstance, Eric has been chosen to bridge our worlds. Let us welcome him not as an outsider, but as a partner in shaping the future." Polite applause followed, though Eric detected undertones of skepticism in some corners. A few individuals exchanged knowing glances, their expressions unreadable. One man in particular caught his eye, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with sharp features and piercing yellow eyes. His stance radiated authority, and the ornate crest pinned to his chest marked him as someone of high standing. He regarded Eric with thinly veiled disdain, making no effort to hide his disapproval. "That's Commander Vale," Lyra whispered discreetly. "He leads the military council. Not everyone shares Nissa's vision." Eric nodded grimly, already sensing the challenges ahead. Diplomacy wasn't his forte, and navigating these complex dynamics felt like walking blindfolded through a minefield. Yet, As Nissa placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, he resolved to try. Failure wasn't an option, not when so much depended on him. The ceremony concluded shortly thereafter, transitioning into a feast unlike anything Eric had ever experienced. Food arrived on floating platters, dishes ranging from vibrant fruits that sparkled like gemstones to savory meats infused with spices that tingled his senses. Drinks shimmered in goblets, changing colors as they were sipped. Though tempted, Eric ate sparingly, wary of consuming anything too unfamiliar. Even so, he couldn't deny the craftsmanship behind each bite. It was clear that dining here was as much an art form as it was sustenance. Throughout the meal, conversations buzzed around him, though few included him directly. Most attendees seemed content to observe rather than engage, their curiosity manifesting in sidelong glances and hushed whispers. Only Lyra remained consistently by his side, offering explanations whenever necessary and deflecting unwanted attention with practiced ease. Nissa, meanwhile, circulated among her guests, fulfilling her duties as hostess while maintaining a watchful eye on Eric from afar. By the time dessert arrived, a towering sculpture of crystallized sugar that refracted light into rainbows, Eric felt both exhausted and exhilarated. This world overwhelmed him in every possible way, yet it also intrigued him. There was beauty here, complexity, and opportunity. Whether he could rise to meet its demands remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: he wouldn't back down without a fight. As the feast drew to a close, Nissa approached him once more, her expression thoughtful. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, "we begin negotiations. Are you ready?" Eric hesitated, then nodded. Ready or not, the stage was set. All he could do now was step into the spotlight and hope he didn't stumble. The palace loomed ahead, its spires piercing the lavender skies of Nissa's homeworld. As Eric stepped through the grand archway, flanked by Lyra and two solemn guards, the weight of expectation settled heavily on his shoulders. Inside, the corridors were alive with movement. Courtiers in flowing garments whispered conspiratorially, servants scurrying with trays of exotic delicacies, and advisors consulting datapads that shimmered with holographic projections. Every corner seemed to pulse with energy, a stark contrast to the austere simplicity of his desert village. Nissa led him to a vast chamber where a circular table dominated the space, surrounded by plush seating areas. Intricate mosaics covered the domed ceiling, depicting scenes of celestial battles and harmonious alliances. The air was thick with anticipation as various dignitaries took their places, their eyes trained on Eric with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He felt like an exhibit in a museum, scrutinized and judged. Commander Vale sat opposite, his presence imposing and his demeanor cold. Beside him, a frail-looking elder named Counselor Mira leaned forward, her keen eyes assessing every detail of Eric's demeanor. Nissa positioned herself at the head of the table, her posture commanding respect. With a graceful gesture, she signaled for the discussions to commence. "We gather today to forge a new alliance," Nissa began, her voice resonating with authority. "An alliance that promises mutual prosperity and understanding between our peoples." Vale scoffed audibly, earning a sharp glance from Nissa. "And what can this human offer us?" he challenged, his tone dripping with disdain. "Strength? Wisdom? Or merely the novelty of his presence?" Eric bristled but held his tongue, remembering Lyra's advice about patience. Instead, he focused on maintaining composure, letting Nissa handle the initial rebuttal. "Commander Vale, your concerns are noted," Nissa replied evenly. "However, Eric represents more than just an individual. He embodies the potential for unity, a bridge between our worlds." Mira interjected softly, her voice carrying surprising weight. "Potential is a fragile thing, Your Highness. It requires nurturing, trust, and shared goals. Can we truly align our destinies with a species so vastly different from ours?" Lyra leaned towards Eric, whispering encouragement. "Speak now. Share your perspective." Taking a deep breath, Eric addressed the assembly. "I understand your doubts. I come from a humble background, unversed in the intricacies of diplomacy or governance. But I bring something perhaps more valuable: adaptability. Humans have survived countless challenges through innovation and resilience. We learn, we grow, and we overcome. This is what I offer: a willingness to listen, to collaborate, and to build a future together." His words hung in the air, met with varied reactions. Some nodded approvingly, while others remained impassive. Vale's scowl deepened, but Mira appeared contemplative, her gaze softening slightly. Adaptability is indeed crucial, Mira conceded. Yet, trust must be earned. How do we ensure that this alliance benefits both our peoples equally? Nissa responded swiftly, outlining proposals for cultural exchanges, technological sharing, and joint exploratory missions. Each suggestion sparked lively debate, with voices rising and falling in passionate discourse. Eric listened intently, absorbing the nuances of their arguments and noting the underlying currents of power dynamics. Hours passed, and fatigue began to creep in. Just as tempers started to fray, a sudden commotion erupted at the entrance. A messenger rushed in, breathless and wide-eyed, bearing urgent news. "Your Highness," the messenger stammered, bowing deeply. "There's been an attack on the outskirts of the capital. Reports indicate rogue factions attempting to destabilize the region." Tension crackled through the room. Vale surged to his feet, his face darkening with fury. "This proves my point. Diverting resources to entertain this proposal weakens our defenses." Nissa rose calmly, her expression steely. "Commander, assemble your troops. Address the threat immediately. Meanwhile, we shall continue these discussions. Our resolve must not waver." As Vale stormed out, followed by several supporters, Mira turned to Nissa. "Perhaps a recess is in order. Allow tempers to cool and reassess our priorities." Nissa agreed, dismissing the remaining delegates temporarily. As the chamber emptied, she approached Eric, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "You handled yourself well. But remember, this is only the beginning. Challenges lie ahead, and we must face them united." Eric nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Whatever trials awaited, he was committed to seeing this alliance through, not just for himself, but for the promise of a better future for both their worlds. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. With the rogue factions threatening the capital, tensions ran high throughout the palace and the city beyond. Nissa worked tirelessly, coordinating military responses while ensuring diplomatic efforts continued. Eric found himself caught in the middle of it all, his presence both a beacon of hope and a target for dissenters who saw him as a symbol of unwelcome change. Despite the chaos, moments of quiet reflection allowed Eric to connect more deeply with those around him. Lyra became not just an advisor but a friend, patiently explaining the intricacies of their culture and helping him navigate the labyrinthine politics of the court. Mira, though initially skeptical, began showing signs of warming up to him, engaging in thoughtful discussions about human resilience and adaptability. Even Commander Vale, whose hostility had been palpable, softened slightly after witnessing Eric's genuine commitment to understanding their world. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting ethereal hues across the sky, Eric stood on a balcony overlooking the glowing cityscape. The air was cool, carrying faint traces of floral scents from distant gardens. Behind him, footsteps echoed softly against the marble floor. Turning, he saw Nissa approach, her silver skin catching the last rays of light. "You've done well," she said simply, joining him at the railing. "Better than I expected." Eric chuckled nervously. "I'm just trying to keep up. Your world is overwhelming." "And yet you persist," she replied, her voice tinged with admiration. "That takes courage." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker to life. Finally, Eric spoke, voicing a thought that had lingered in his mind for days. "Do you ever wonder if this is all too much? If maybe we're rushing into something neither of us fully understands?" Nissa turned to face him, her galaxy-like eyes searching his. "Of course I do. But fear shouldn't dictate our choices. Progress rarely comes without risk." Her words resonated deeply within him. He realized then that this wasn't just about forging alliances or bridging worlds, it was about trust. Trust in each other, in their shared vision, and in the belief that together, they could create something extraordinary. The next morning brought news of victory. Vale's forces had successfully quelled the uprising, capturing key leaders responsible for the attacks. Though skirmishes still simmered along the borders, The immediate threat to the capital had been neutralized. Spirits lifted noticeably, and the atmosphere within the palace shifted from tension to cautious optimism. Negotiations resumed with renewed vigor. This time, however, there was a noticeable difference. Delegates who had previously held back now participated actively, offering innovative solutions and compromises. Mira proposed establishing joint research facilities where humans and aliens could collaborate on scientific advancements. Other council members suggested cultural exchange programs, allowing citizens from both worlds to experience and learn from each other firsthand. Through it all, Eric remained steadfast, contributing ideas rooted in human ingenuity and perseverance. His suggestions often sparked lively debates, leading to breakthroughs that might otherwise have been overlooked. Slowly but surely, the framework of their alliance took shape, a testament to mutual respect and cooperation. As weeks turned into months, Eric grew more comfortable in his role. He formed bonds not only with Nissa and Lyra but also with many others who had once viewed him with suspicion. Together, they celebrated small victories, successful trade agreements, groundbreaking discoveries, and even festivals honoring both cultures. One such festival marked the official signing of the Alliance Treaty. Held in the Grand Hall where their journey had begun, the event was nothing short of spectacular. Lanterns floated overhead, casting shimmering reflections on the polished floors. Music filled the air, blending traditional alien melodies with human rhythms in harmonious fusion. Guests mingled freely, laughter and conversation flowing effortlessly. At the heart of it all stood Eric and Nissa, side by side as they affixed their signatures to the document binding their worlds together. Cheers erupted around them, echoing off the walls like thunder. For the first time since arriving, Eric felt truly at home, not because he belonged entirely to this world, but because he had found a place where differences didn't divide but enriched. Later that night, as fireworks painted the sky in dazzling colors, Eric found himself alone with Nissa once more. They watched the display from the same balcony where they'd shared quiet moments before. Her hand slipped into his, warm despite her cool exterior. "We did it," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the distant booms. "Yes," he agreed, squeezing her hand gently. "Together." In that moment, surrounded by beauty and promise, Eric knew they had embarked on something greater than either of them could have imagined. Their alliance wasn't perfect, it never would be, but it was real. And sometimes, that was enough. As the final bursts of light faded into darkness, leaving behind a canvas of stars, Eric smiled. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he faced them not alone, but alongside friends, allies, and a princess who believed in the power of unity. Together, they would continue building bridges, creating futures, and proving that even the most unlikely connections could lead to happiness.